DCS Harmony is one of my projects that I started like last year, I think. Um, and it was basically about trying to um, figure out how to better collaborate and share with the other groups that are also trying to do DCS interfaces or are very successfully doing DCS interfaces. And through that, I noticed that actually Helios is not exactly the strongest group in that sense. Um, Basically, you can look at it this way. Around the world, there's a handful of people who, when a new airplane comes out, figure out what, figure out the DCS Lua and figure out like what clickable cockpit controls that airplane has, like what switches does it have, what potentiometers, what rotary encoders are in the cockpit and things like that. On the Helios side, there's Captain Zine does that manually. He's very good at it, and Bluefin did it for the Harrier and for the F-18. Originally Gadrock did it for the A-10. And on the DCS BIOS side, there's several contributors, but the primary contributor I would say is a guy named Warlord, who is very, very good at this, and also DCS BIOS has basically a lot less barriers to contribution than Helios does. Like in Helios, we make those interfaces in C# code, and nobody wants to do that, and it was never designed really to take open source contributions, right? It was originally going to be commercial, and it's going to sell the interfaces, stuff like that. So it's not surprising we're not as good at it. Trying to change that now, but anyways, the reality of the matter is Helios has a small handful of interfaces, and then the Captain Zine profiles have their own interfaces, which are difficult to use if you're not that same profile because of how Helios does interfaces. And DCS BIOS has interfaces for pretty much every aircraft in DCS, and it's used by mostly some people are use both, but DCS BIOS is primarily targeting the community. Uses like embedded controllers, Arduino boxes, things like that, to build cockpits and feed information in those. And ours is obviously a bit different, and we have different models and different objectives. But be that as it may, in the end, if you look at DCS BIOS, and we bring it up here, the flight panels branch of DCS BIOS that I mostly look at, these are the airplanes that they have support for. That's quite a lot compared to our 3, something like that. So what I did is I started this project to try to understand how to combine those efforts, so that any work that we do in Helios could be fed back to DCS BIOS in terms of finding bugs in interfaces, and vice versa. We could get, in the reverse, in the other direction, Helios would benefit from much more interface support. And it turns out that the way we do the interfaces is very different, and so it's a great deal of work. But in the end, I built this thing to try to correlate between the interfaces that we do have. And that was, I would say, marginally successful. I was able to give back some bug fixes back to Warlord, saying like, hey, this interface, we find it's actually this other number instead of this number in the protocol, that sort of thing. And so I built this kind of emulator thing for DCS BIOS so I could analyze their modules, and a thing for Helios that analyzes our interfaces and then correlates them and tries to find bugs. Maybe somewhat successful, I don't know. But so anyways, what came out of that is built this database. I figured that I would find other projects around the web of like other people who do these kind of interfaces, and I would bring them into the fold, and we had to have this big DCS Harmony. In reality, there was just us two and Icarus, and we don't work with Icarus. And so really nobody ever else. I guess, I'm sorry, there's one other dude out there that does something, but it's not really, there's not really another library of modules anywhere to integrate. So it's pretty much right now, it's just DCS BIOS and a little bit of Helios. So here's what happened. I imported all the aircraft, I sorted the information, and I correlated them. And then what that allows us to do is do things like, look in the A10 and say, okay, we have, we have like, let's say, I don't know, is there a 137? Apparently there is. Okay. So argument 137, when sent from DCS in Helios, is implemented this way. Helios thinks it's a type VHF preset selector. It's called VHF AM radio preset channel selector. In DCS BIOS, the same thing is called VHF AM preset. It's a channel selector, uses the same numbers. Okay, so that is probably correct, right? Because two different DCS BIOS releases, the 0.10 and 0.7, both have the same answer, and Helios also has the same answer. So it's a very good chance that if two people independently come up with the same thing and two different user bases didn't report a bug, it's probably correct. So that's basically what the point of the project is. You can imagine this database is very large, and if anybody is interested in building interface support for different things, they definitely can get access to that information. I don't really make any promises of keeping it up to date or anything like that. It's really, right now, it was just for my use and in order to generate bugs. And I would say the main two good things came out of the project. One is that, very good working relationship with Warlord, and we had a few reviews, where we're so like, okay, these are the things that are different, and then every one of them was assigned a bug either in Helios or in DCS BIOS. Usually the bug was in Helios, and as a result, both of our interfaces got a little bit better, and I think that's good. The other thing is that I got out of it is I built this kind of emulation environment where it can run the DCS BIOS modules in like an emulated DCS BIOS and extract their information, and that's going to be pretty important for the next two phases of that project, which are the next two videos. Or maybe three. I don't know. I haven't recorded them yet.